开门艳娘恨，你需要想啊想，娘恨艳娘恨，你开呀门那艳呐。
The thing which makes UH art history stand out is that it's, to my knowledge, the only program in the United States which is explicitly Asia-Pacific focused. And as a result, we're able to offer a kind of perspective which I think is potentially pretty groundbreaking in the discipline of art history. This exhibition showcases the collection of a Taiwanese collector, Mr. Franklin Huang, who's been collecting these pieces since the 1980s. It's one of the best quality exhibitions of this kind of material that I've ever seen and that anyone is likely to see. Mr. Huang's collection contains about 12,000 pieces, of which several hundred are on exhibition here. I want to say something like 500 pieces are on exhibit here. And these are pieces that showcase styles and techniques that are in danger of disappearing with increased modernization. People still make things like this, but they don't make them in such a labor-intensive way. They use machine-made textiles, they take shortcuts using machine-made applied decoration. All of these are things that we sort of expect as people of Southwest China move into the modern era with the rest of us. Whether you regret it or not depends on your perspective. But the point is that some of these things, while they're still being made, are not being made in exactly the same way. And so some of these are types of objects that are no longer to be seen in China. And Mr. Huang is very much dedicated to the effort of preserving these as a kind of cultural heritage for the descendants of the people who made them in the first place. So we're very fortunate to have a chance to see them here in Hawaii. The exhibition begins with work that's produced by ethnic minority groups that live in close proximity to the Han majority. And so what you see is going to look very familiar to anybody who's at all familiar with traditional Chinese dress. You see women's upper garments with an asymmetrical closure, with these kind of knotted buttons, with embroidered designs that follow the edge of the asymmetrical closure down to the side with cloud patterns. There's even a cutout and appliqued cloud collar laying over the upper garment on display. All of these are things which are familiar from traditional Chinese costume of the late Qing and early Republic of China period. And they're the kinds of traditional Chinese costume that might have been seen around Hawaii as well in the 19th and early 20th centuries. Upon entering the exhibition, we begin to see things that don't look so familiar. One of the things that always draws people's attention is these very spectacular Miao costumes. They're typically women's costumes in which the wearer is loaded down with silver. The upper garments are sewn all over with silver plaques so that they almost look like armor. And the wearer is loaded down with enormous necklaces and these spectacular horned headdresses, all beaten out of silver. They're extraordinary work. This kind of an outfit was typically a courting outfit. The silver was family property, and your family, if you were a young girl, your family would send you out to the festival with all of the family silver weighing you down, and the headdress alone can weigh 6 kilograms, which is something like 9 pounds. Your family would send you out loaded down with all the silver in your finery as a signal that you were looking for a partner, and this was part of the marriage ritual. There is a tradition among some of these ethnic groups in which after a young girl is married, she actually doesn't go to her new husband's house, but goes home to her parents' house and spends several years sometimes in seclusion working only on articles of clothing for herself and for her new family. This is the only time in a woman's life that she has enough time to do this really, really fancy work. And you can see various techniques that have been used to produce the outfit you see here. There's a shiny finish on the dark cotton, which these costumes are made of, which is produced by boiling the fabric in a solution of cowhide. It also enables the many hundreds of pleats in the skirt to be made. The treatment of the fabric with a cowhide solution makes it possible to make those pleats permanent, basically cook them into the fabric. So there's quite a lot of work just treating the fabric before you get into the embroidery and the stitching and the pleating and all of the construction work that's done. It's a really extraordinary amount of work. So the theme of the exhibition is writing with thread, and the reason that we chose that title was that many of the people whose work is represented here did not have their own written language. A few did, but not all of them. Some of the people whose work is shown here understand the meanings of their embroidery designs as constituting a kind of historical record. So in other words, they use embroidery patterns on their clothing to record important events of their history, and hence we have the title Writing with Thread. The classic example is of the, again, Miao garments with large square motifs on the backs, which are explained by the people who made them as representing a map of the city which the Miao occupied in ancient historical times, before being driven south by the expanding Han Chinese state. There's a saying, apparently, that the Miao carried the city on their back, that when they were driven out of this walled city, they stood and looked back at it and thought, we'll never return here again, but we can carry our history with us. So that's the local explanation for this kind of motif on the back of a garment, and that's why we understand at least some of the work that we see here as being a kind of historical record.